Today, I am going to continue talking about the book Interconnected, and I am going to start today on the section titled True Connectivity. And this is talking about, of course, modern technology and the web and so many other things like texting, Facebook, and on and on. I thought I'd start by talking a little bit about the man who they say invented the internet, a guy named Tim Berners-Lee. He said this, that he created the web as a way for researchers to share information with each other, and that he was working with scientists in the quote, European Organization for Nuclear Research, better known as CERN, CERN. And he realized that these different scientists were all working on different computers, different systems, operating systems, and so forth. And these computers had no way of talking to each other. So, quote, it was designed to be a universal. The whole point was breaking apart silos, he said. Of course, figurative silos, not farm silos. But he wanted communication to be easier, and he felt that there was a tremendous power of having all these computers connected across cultural and national borders and so forth. Quote, the idea was that it could put anything on it. I never imagined it could be the kind of thing to have everything on it. So I thought that was an interesting little bit of background information. Now, Karmapa talking about the modern technology, he says that while we're connected to so much, it can leave us emotionally disconnected or isolated, that our way of feeling, our way of living haven't really followed this new understanding or this new technology, and that it can lead to being isolated, feeling disconnected, feeling alienated even. He feels that the digital screen makes distance and separation rather than spanning distance. And there's much that we can do to remedy this, but we need to be aware of this problem to begin with. And that we can learn to use the internet more wisely. And it does have a lot of opportunities that we can take advantage of. One of the problems that he points out is that it can lead to seeing differences, point out differences more strongly between cultures, between people, between countries, and as a result, create a feeling of separation that is stronger than what would have been without the internet. So what we have to do, what our responsibility is to investigate and look through the lens of interdependence and interconnections when we are on the internet. Quote, we can review the ample evidence and arguments that show that those who have less economic power provide the labor that keeps down the cost of living and fuels the material prosperity of those who have more. So if we look at people, let's say over in Asia, South Asia, and so forth, China, India, Indonesia, Vietnam, and so forth, that produce so many of the goods that we use, we can see them as actually being very helpful to us rather than being totally different. It's easy to think and develop the attitude that, well, that's the way it is over there. What came to my mind was a phrase that I heard during the Vietnam War, and that is life is cheap. Life is cheap over in Asia. You don't live as long, and they're having a lot of suffering anyway. So what difference does it make if you work under very poor labor conditions, if we ship our garbage over to your country, and so on and so forth? We want to avoid this kind of an attitude. Karmapa talks about, and I find this interesting, quote, "It's largely an accident of our birth and our life circumstances that we have come to find certain conditions familiar and others alien or distant." What I find was particularly interesting about that is he did not mention karma, but he is talking to American college students, and he's trying to keep this free of Buddhist terms as possible. The point is, we are very fortunate to be born in the United States or Canada, as it is with some people that are watching this. And as a result, we have a very different view of the world. And quite honestly, I just saw a report recently that homelessness has gone up 12% in the last year in the United States. So it isn't like the United States is the best place to live. It can be a very difficult place to live for many people. And it's important for us to realize how fortunate we are, but not then to go back to that silo analogy, to live in a silo and ignore people that don't have such fortunate circumstances as we have. To realize that all of us, all human beings, want to avoid suffering and want to be happy, and that we have this in common no matter where the person lives, no matter what their circumstances are. By thinking this way, this can help, again, see that we have a certain closeness and shared experience with all human beings, regardless of where they live and under what circumstances they are in. The next section here is called Going Beyond Virtual Reality. This is, again, in the category of using modern technology wisely. It does have great potential, but the internet highlights things that are out of the ordinary. What's news is usually what is out of the ordinary, what is upsetting, what is painful and unusual, and problems. And nowadays, with so many of these cable channels, there is a strong opinion, or if not a strong opinion, a subtle opinion associated with the particular news item. And people go to a news source that you might say, agrees with them. They choose what opinion they want to watch the news through, what lens they want to watch the news through. This, of course, is not using the internet in a wise manner. It's merely just strengthening your own opinions. And we've come to the point now where we live in different worlds. It's hard to believe, but in a way, people live in different worlds. They get so strong about their own opinions and they are right and everybody else is wrong. And people that agree with you are friends and people that disagree with you are the enemy. And Galwan Karmapa says hypersensitivity to differences desensitizes us to our universal shared condition. Here are some of the faults of online communication, and this would be talking about social media primarily. First of all, there's an incomplete person that you present what you want to present. You do not usually present your faults, your weaknesses, and so forth. A second problem is that there's no nonverbal communication, no body language, so to speak. And so it's easier to, you might say, put up a false front to deceive other people. Thirdly, there is not much etiquette in terms of what is proper and what is improper on the social media, and this can cause wider emotional swings. You have a electronic version of yourself on the screen interacting with an illusory electronic version of other people on the screen. And you get likes and hearts and hugs and various other emoji. And that's it, that it's difficult for technology to convey simply basic human warmth. And this is what we need, is basic human warmth, especially when we're in pain, when we're having a difficult time. It's very difficult to convey this over the internet. And then there is this idea of trolls, that if you do show pain, then other people out there, or sometimes it's just artificial intelligence that does this, that puts up things to specifically cause you more pain. I recently put on my Facebook page a posting that was intended to convey that we have the possibility of love, kindness, appreciation for others, or we have the possibility of anger, hatred, wanting to harm, and so forth. And one person posted something like, well, what does that say about da 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 da, a certain politician who he did not like? And it was like, okay, I mean, I didn't respond to it. Another person responded to it saying that you missed the whole point of the posting. And then he responded back with even more anger. And I deleted the whole conversation of that because it was going nowhere. But this is what happens. It gets very, what do they say, goes down to the sewer pretty quickly on the internet. And so we have to be careful of that we don't get dragged down with it. Karmapa feels that the sadness and the loneliness in the world today is a sign that we've lost touch with this basic human element, that the fullness of human contact is missing, and that we are in danger of losing contact with these inner resources of ours. We need to have this capacity in order to have authentic closeness to others. That's a direct quote, authentic closeness to others. Then he goes on in the section titled Don't Live a Light Life, Lite, as in free of calories or whatever. He cautions avoid being superficial in your use of the internet. And it's easy to end up trivializing our lives, just looking at a very, very shallow level on the social media. The way to do this is to look at our interconnectedness. Because of the World Wide Web, we can know a tremendous amount of knowledge. That knowledge is not a substitute for feeling more. We have to let what we learn impact our heart and our positive emotions. It's easy to just scroll down your feed on, let's say, Facebook, and click on like, then go to the next one, click on like, don't like, whatever. That this is very superficial, it's very light, and that this can distract us from having meaning in our life, having purpose in our lives. And it can also reinforce other people, the ones that you're liking, in their attitude towards themselves and towards life. It's easy to have these unrealistic assumptions and then believe them. Then they are that we can find happiness in a screen or in external objects around us. Happiness comes from within. You can be happy and not be connected to the internet at all. So we have to realize and investigate, is technology leading us further from reality? Is it leading us away from our wholesomeness? And if it is, then we need to reorient our relationship with technology. Very simply, we need to use technology instead of it using us. The next part of this chapter is emotional disconnectivity. So people can feel emotionally disconnected even though they're constantly interacting online. It's interesting. You can be out in public and see people at a restaurant sitting at the table, and they're all looking at their screen instead of talking to each other. They might even be texting each other across the table. There is this disconnectivity when this is happening, that this is not natural. Karmapa says. He then, you might say, reminisces a little bit about his childhood in Tibet. He said that when I was a child, we worked according to the sun, not to the clock. And that you did what needed to be done and then stopped and then spent time together after that. We would enjoy each other's company after we were done working. That was a big part of the day, was being together with other people. And of course, there was no texting because there was no electricity. He said that his father may have had a watch, but he wasn't sure. It was a very, very different lifestyle, and it has been disappearing even in Tibet. So what is happening with technology and cell phones and texting and everything is that we're losing the ability to be fully present when we're with others. We're distracted. And this can have very negative impact on relationships. We're out of step with reality. I remember way back in the late 80s when I first came to Buddhism, I was studying with Chogyam Trungpa. One of the things that he said that was repeated over and over again is you have to listen before you hear, and you have to look before you see. And just listening doesn't mean you will hear, and looking doesn't mean you will see, but you've got a better chance. So it is important that we are more present with what's going on around us, that then we have a better chance of understanding other people, understanding ourselves, understanding our situation. Karmapa says we have to extend our heart to others if we're going to experience satisfaction. The next section is titled Introducing His Loneliness, and he is talking a little bit more about his own personal experience here. First of all, his situation is unique, and many people see him as being supernatural. That's his word. He can't be friends in person or online. He mentioned, well, I could have a Facebook pseudonym, but that would be unethical, he says. And his own Facebook page, he doesn't manage. He's got someone else that manages it, probably another monk that knows much more about the internet than he does. And as a result, he can be very isolated. He can't just go for a walk. He has to have attendants with him, and he can only go certain places. And when I have seen him, for instance, at KTD, if he goes for a walk, there is a whole group of other people, kind of the equivalent of Taylor Swift and Swifties, that follow him wherever he goes, and they're constantly taking pictures of him. He is treated very differently and has to act very differently than you or I do when we are out in public. Now, contrast that to the virtual world. Even he says that we generally market ourselves online, and the last thing we want to do is share our vulnerabilities online in most cases, because of his situation, could be looked at as being very lonely, and that when we market ourselves and don't share our vulnerabilities, we tend to feel very lonely. He then goes on to talk about how the difference between Tibetan culture and Western culture. In Tibetan culture, if you are an older person, let's say like me, and someone offers to help you, the older person is grateful. Whereas in the West, it is, well, wait a minute, do you think I'm an old person? I am not that old. I can take care of myself, yada, yada, yada. Well, personally, more and more when that happens to me, I say, yes, go ahead. Lift that heavy thing out of my shopping bag and put it into my car. But I have to admit that when that first started happening, I did feel, wait a minute, I am stronger than you think I am. It's fine to show our vulnerability in a certain way. We don't have to put up this defensive attitude. And this helps us be less alone, be less lonely. This gives us a connection with other people. And it allows us to trust other people. this interconnections that we have really lets us know that we're never truly alone. The next section is come in from the cold. And I seem to recall that phrase being used in spy novels and spy movies. You know, when you're a spy, you're under an alias and it's a lonely, cold place. And I'm assuming that that is kind of what he is referring to here too. On the internet, we're almost like an alias, where it's not really who we are, it's a assumed identity. And we can feel very lonely, and we can come in from out of that lonely place. And it starts by making friends with ourselves, connecting with our positive qualities like love and compassion. Treasure these and value them. And it is our strength that comes from connecting with these qualities. You could feel lonely because you haven't made a connection with these positive qualities. When we make friends with these and grow them, these become supporting factors, and it helps us grow our potential for developing even deeper good qualities. Quote, you can become a friend to your basic radiance and wholeheartedly, unequivocally nurture your positive qualities. So we want to befriend ourselves. We want to have kind thoughts and good, wholehearted feelings towards ourselves. He talked about warming yourself from within. So this is our inner strength, and this is what we can use then to go forth and connect with outer friends and cut through the loneliness, be more authentic, have more trust in ourselves and who we are, that we don't have to present a false persona. And the more we allow these inner qualities to grow, the easier it is for us to connect with others and see our interconnections. The next section is our natural capacity for closeness. Here we have this experience to this possibility to have genuine closeness, to experience it, that this is an innate potential in everyone. We can cultivate it. He notices that children exhibit this naturally. And as I was reading that, a memory came up. I was in China, in Beijing, at a historical site. You might say a museum. It was mostly outdoor grounds with certain buildings on it. And at one point, there were some kids, young kids, school kids, and there were a couple of adult chaperones there. And of course, they were behaving like kids, running around, screaming, touching each other, jumping up and down, climbing on things, having a wonderful time. And I thought, you know, any kid could have gone in and joined in the fun, even if they didn't understand Chinese, because they were just acting like kids. And the sound of kids doing that, pretty universal. I didn't understand a word that they were saying, but it was very, very obvious what they were doing, which was having fun and acting like kids. And it was wonderful to see this. Now, this is an aside. Another moment of that time, I was at another place and I heard a couple of Australians talking to each other. And I said something like, "You sound like Aussies." And he looked at me and said, "You sound like a Yank." So we both got a big grin on our face and went on. But, these little connections that we can make with people, maybe have a little smile and go on with our lives. But we tend to cover this up that as we age, we tend to get more serious. Fears, suspicions, doubts arise. We cover up these things that we have in common with layers and layers of differences. So if we can train in seeing interdependence at work in our lives, we can become more aware of how other people are present in our lives. If you really look at it, just about everything in our lives that we view as valuable comes from outside of us, comes from things that other people have done. So he goes on and cites a research study that I have never heard of before, but it's about people in elevators. And we've all experienced this sort of thing ourselves. Researchers do this for humans, and they also do it with chimpanzees, which he found interesting. And so you have an elevator, you have a subject, a human, get on the elevator, and there's no one else in the elevator. And then they're going up to a certain floor, and on their way up there, the elevator stops, and another human gets in the elevator. And they look at the expression on the person that was in the elevator first, and they find that there is usually no interaction between the two humans, and there are visible signs of discomfort, and there certainly are no smiles. Now, when they do this with chimpanzees, and then another chimpanzee enters, there are signs of delight. They become joyful and sometimes even hug one another. So he is using this as an example of how we humans, as we get older, put on layer and layer and layer of differences, mistrust, and so forth. And this makes it very difficult for us to connect with each other. The remedy, of course, is to reflect on interdependence and to make a conscious effort of training ourselves to identify how positively we are affected by other people and to be more aware of the presence of other people and value them. And again, this starts with connecting with our inner qualities. Then he goes on to recollecting the kindness, and is a practice. He describes it as a practice of thinking about situations where we receive something from others. And this can help us generate gratitude. And this gratitude has a tremendously positive impact on us. So he talks about clothing, food, housing, healthcare, parents, teachers, technology, cars, and of course, with cars comes infrastructure, which is the roads, the bridges, part of the country, the snow plowing, maintenance, and so forth. All of these things that we are actually accepting, that was his word, accepting the kindness of other people, and they're working towards making whatever it is that we are using, whether it be clothing, plowing the snow, the cashier at the store that takes our money and gives us a receipt, and so forth, that all of them are helping us, and we can look at this as their kindness. And this can make us feel gratitude. We can realize that other people have helped us in many, many, many different ways. And then, of course, contemplate that they want to be happy and they want to be free of suffering. And frequently, they are not, especially if they come from the other part of the world. They're working under very difficult situations. We can want to help them be free of suffering. We can learn about the lives of these people. We can get on the internet and learn about factory conditions for clothing workers in Indonesia or Vietnam or China or whatever. We can contemplate what would happen if we grew up in those conditions and had to work under those conditions. So this can help us develop gratitude and a feeling of closeness for people all over the world. And it also can heighten our awareness of the disparities between living conditions. And he says this can actually motivate you to act to improve their circumstances. And there's a list of ways that you could act. One, you could contribute to organizations working to benefit these workers. You could avoid purchasing products that have weak regulatory protection for their workers, or maybe no protection. You can become more interested and donate when there is a natural disaster in that part of the world, or if there's political strife or war. He says you can take action to make a positive change in the world. You could even visit that part of the world, learn more about it through actual visiting. So this is what he calls living in interdependence. And it's a way of bringing goodness to both yourself and to others. Then the next section is the value of interdependence. I'll start with a definition of gratitude. Quote, gratitude is an inner orientation that aligns us emotionally with the outer reality of our lives. So gratitude is a value of interdependence. And it leads us from awareness to a feeling of action and appreciation. So I looked up on the internet the definition of appreciation and how to use it. One is the recognition and enjoyment of the good qualities of someone or something, as in, I smiled in appreciation. Definition number two is a full understanding of a situation, as in, they have an appreciation of the needs of users. So we can train ourselves to feel surrounded, to be having goodness on all sides and benefit on all sides from the world, that the whole world is supporting us and our lives. He says that the whole world becomes our personal benefactor. We can find these ideas very useful and bring out the best in ourselves. And people that are difficult, they can challenge us to grow, to improve. And in a way, they are also personal benefactors. The Tibetans have a saying, which is, your worst enemy is your best teacher, because they can teach you patience like nobody else can. The more we understand this, the more we can become a positive force in the world. I don't think he talks about the ripple effect, but that's really what is being said here, that interdependence is like the ripple effect, that what we do spreads out in ripples and affects the whole world, just like the whole world affects us, that it's a two-way street. And the final section of this chapter is the kindness of animals. So the natural world, the environment, the earth, and the animals on it, we are very close to them as well. Sometimes we might feel that we're a little too close. For instance, when the squirrels try to get into my house or the mice try to get into my house. He says that animals do not play the manipulative games that humans do. On the other hand, pets can be very important to their owners. If anyone has ever had a pet, they realize there's quite a bond that happens between the pet and the pet owner. Here is a sight that struck me very strongly when I saw it. This was a long, long time ago. I was at a strip mall and there was a pet store at the strip mall. And I was in the parking lot in the car, and out of the pet store came a biker with a black leather jacket, the chains and the studs and everything. And he was carrying a clear plastic bag. And in that bag was water and a goldfish. So this cold, fierce-looking biker had a warm spot in his heart for a goldfish. I don't know if he let anyone else know that he had a warm spot in his heart for a goldfish, but it was obvious to me. This is the point of pets, is that they can open up our hearts. On the other hand, pets, and especially domestic farm animals, are frequently mistreated, and they don't want to be killed or hurt, yet they frequently are by humans. Karmapa wants us to be aware of how our eating habits affect animals. And while he doesn't say that you have to be a vegetarian, he has said that his monks and nuns are to be vegetarian, and those that are lay practitioners should eat less meat. And we also need to take a look at the natural environment and how we are connected to it and the impact that our activities have on the natural environment. All of this is about, again, interdependence and interconnection, and that we need to contemplate how our lifestyle impacts the environment, and perhaps change our behavior so that we have a better impact on the environment.